happy Friday, and welcome back to Financial Wellness Fridays. I hope you all had a fantastic week and are just as excited as I am to get the weekend started. In today's video, we're going to be continuing our series on how to budget with another budgeting method called the zero-based budget. You may have heard of this budget as it was popularized in the 90s by financial guy Dave Ramsey, but if you haven't, then today I'll be providing a brief overview. If that sounds like something you might be interested in, then stick around, and as always, I would love it if you would hit the subscribe button to follow along my financial wellness journey and pick up some education along the way. The zero-based budget is based off of a super simple formula. It is income minus expenditures equals zero. And I know you might be thinking, wait a second, Mariah, we have spent weeks talking about how we're not supposed to spend all of our income, we're supposed to put it on savings. And now you're telling me I'm supposed to get my income to zero in a month? That's right. But first, I want to give you a little background on the zero-based budget because I think it has a quite interesting one compared to its peers. The zero-based budget was actually invented by Texas Instruments project manager Peter Peer in the 1960s. It was originally created as a way for project managers to cut down the costs of their projects, and it was definitely first created for the use of companies and corporations. Over time, though, people liked that it had this cost-cutting effect and provided a lot more scrutiny to the amount of money that companies were spending, and so some people started to develop it for the use of individuals and families. And that's how we got the zero-based budget that we as individuals use now. The zero-based budget can be a little bit difficult when you're first setting it up, but as soon as you get it all set up and figured out, it's super easy to follow up with. So follow along while I take you through the 5 steps of creating your zero-based budget. The first step is to list out all of your income over the period. And the period you can determine yourself. If you're pretty disciplined with budgeting, then a 1-month period is perfectly fine. But if you need a little bit of help staying caught up with your budget and making sure that you're following through, then you might want to do it based on pay period. When I say lay out all of your income, I mean all of it. This includes any income from your 9-to-5 job, a part-time job, any gig work that you're doing, any investments that you have that are coming in on a regular basis or during the period. You're going to write that down at the top of your sheet or in your Excel spreadsheet, wherever you do your budgeting, and that is how we're going to get started. The next step is to take out all of your fixed expenses. And these expenses are fixed. Anything that can't change even if we need to make cuts in other areas of the budget. This is going to be things like rent, of course, because you can't go up to your landlord and say, hey, gotta cut $300 out of the budget, so I'm gonna pay $300 less this month. I don't think that would go over well. Another thing that's included in this is utilities or debt payments if you have those. Some people like to include groceries in here as well, but I include groceries as a variable expense, and I'll explain why when we get to that section. Once you have all of your fixed expenses subtracted from your income, you're going to move on to your savings and investment goals. This is where you get to decide how much you want to save over the period. Unlike the 50-30-20 rule, it's not a prescribed amount, so you get to choose what works best for your expenses and savings goals. After you've subtracted your savings out of the remainder of your income, you're going to move on to your variable expenses. This includes things like gas and, like I said, groceries. The reason why I believe that groceries are a variable expense rather than a fixed is, yes, I understand that, of course, we need groceries to survive. However, sometimes we might be spending more than we need to on groceries, and one instance of this is if you're shopping at high-end retailers like Whole Foods instead of going to stores like Walmart, where the groceries are a lot cheaper. It's great to shop at Whole Foods if you can afford it, but if we need to make room in your budget, then it might be better to search for more affordable options. And that's why I personally believe that groceries are a variable expense. So you're going to take all of your variable expenses and subtract them as well. And then we're going to move on to the last category, which is anything else. In this section, you're going to assign all of your wants into a separate category. These things can include dining out, entertainment, extra clothing, anything like that. But the important part here is that you assign every dollar left after the first 4 steps into a category so that when we get to the end, there's $0 left out of your income. Here you can interchange throughout the month. If you decide you don't want to spend the amount that you set aside for clothes on clothes, then you can choose to spend it on entertainment instead. But this is the only category where you're allowed to do this. We obviously don't want to be borrowing from expenses to pay for wants, and especially the fixed expense category, because we know those are going to be the same amount every month. Now, once we get to the end, like I said, it's really important to make sure that you have reached zero. I wanted to throw in a brief section at the end to kind of make a comparison between the 50-30-20 rule and budgets like it and the zero-based rule, just in case you're not really sure which budget is going to be best for you. The 50-30-20 rule takes a very broad approach to budgeting. It tells you specific percentages that you can spend, but it doesn't really tell you where your money goes beyond that. That doesn't work for some people that might have goals or expenses outside of that category, and because it's very broad, it can be difficult to use. The zero-based budget takes a lot more of a focus on justifying each expense for the month. And it's a lot more personal. It doesn't prescribe a specific amount for each category, so some people prefer it for that reason. However, as with every budgeting strategy, it does have its pros and cons. The pros of the zero-based budget are that it helps you track your money coming in and out a lot better than other budgeting strategies do, because you have to plan for it before it comes in, and then you have to make sure you take it out once you spend it. It also makes sure that you know where every single dollar is going. So if you like to have a little bit more control over your finances, this budget will give you that peace of mind. One thing that I really love about the zero-based budget is that it is super customizable. Like I said earlier, there's not a set savings amount that you should be saving. There's not a set expenses amount like the 50-30-20 rule. So I find this super beneficial if people have savings goals that are higher than 20%, or if they perhaps have expenses that are already higher than the 50% because they might be locked into a lease. But of course, it does come with its cons. The zero-based budget is quite a bit more time consuming than a 50-30-20 rule because, like I said, you have to apply scrutiny to each one of those transactions that you're making. And one other con is if you make variable income, that's a little bit more difficult to track on a period-to-period basis, such as if you do freelancing or variable gig work, then it can be a little bit harder to set out the plan for the zero-based budget. One tip that I did want to throw out there, if this seems a little bit overwhelming to organize right off the bat, is that Dave Ramsey has actually created an app called the Every Dollar. It is mostly free to use the features that you really need on it, and it is another budgeting app like Mint, but it specifically focuses on the zero-based budget. I'll link it down below if you're interested in using this budget, and you can download the app and get started that way. That is a brief overview of the zero-based budget. I hope you found it helpful and interesting. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down below. As always, leave a like if you enjoyed the video and share it with your friends if you think they would find it helpful too. I hope you have a fantastic weekend, and we'll see you next week.